Hello, this is Brian Whitten and ET Art. I've just inserted this image here just to have a look at for a second. Before I go on, if you are 13 years or younger, can you please go and get your mum and dad and ask them if it's okay if you watch this. For the rest of you, the video, or at least the image that we're seeing now on screen, is in actual fact where I kicked off from on the night of my 60th birthday, a little bit over a year ago now. I'm now 61 and had another birthday, and I thought I might bring you back to this image that you can see on the screen now, which is out of my evolution video. I'm going to kick it off and start it running. I know you get a little bit of reflection on the TV at the moment. I'm doing this at daytime, but you can go back and look at this video. It is the evolution video. And I want you just to watch, if you would. First of all, look at this image here. If that's a profile of a face. In this video we see a duck-billed dinosaur in this portion. Now just watching what happens here, you'll see he actually turns into an American Indian, a North American Indian there, and this face here, although you don't see it in this portion very well, I will go back to that bit if you like, and then I want you to just watch his face here. That's my stickers I'm showing you in the video what I was doing. And this one here, where you can see his eye come out there and there, that's a duck-billed dinosaur that turns into a reptilian. But watch this guy's face. This is the white face here. Watch what happens, because it comes into, this is where you see the reptilian's head a little bit better here. I move away from that, I think, and go and look at different angles here. But I come back to his face, okay? So I just want you to watch that again. I know we're actually recording this now twice, which is not making it any better from you from a vision point of view, but like I said, this isn't the end of the evolution video. So I want you to watch what happens here when I start moving the light back over this side and what this man's face turns into. It is very important, and the reason I wanted to start with this today is because I saw something that, and I've seen it twice now and thought I really should put that in a video because it is very important. That's where we get to see the reptilian species more there. And here, when I move it back over to the other side, so there's quite a few different changes you'll see go on in here, and you see a bloke leaning against the wall here. See, he's got his legs crossed and leaning against the wall. It's actually quite amazing. And that's what happens if you're coming from the wrong direction. I'm sitting here, I'm getting impatient, you're looking in the wrong spot. They're the sort of things that do happen. It's really quite uncanny, and that's why I said there is elements within the design of the lighting and everything that is without doubt human. And that's why I said our ancestors were alive when this happened many, many millions of years ago. You can see him leaning against the wall there. It's really quite an uncanny thing, that. But as I move along here, we see another feature here, another face come in there with his ear here and his hair back. It changes again, and watch what goes down here. Now I want you to watch this now as we move back here. I want you to watch that white face. Look at what it is there. There. Okay, that is a North American Indian it switches into. It's so obvious that that's who it is, but I want you to look at the face that it comes from. Face there with an extended snout, okay, because he's saying that's where we evolved from. He evolved in this one from a duck-billed dinosaur, a large skull grey alien, this one here on my side, on the right side, and on the left he's saying the human species evolved from this person here. Now there, if I stop that there, that is where you're starting to get down to the Indian, like a North American Indian. It is so obvious that's who that is. It's nobody else. It can be nobody else. The image that you're seeing there. It's better when you see the light moving. Sometimes when you stop it, you do not get the effect they wanted to do. And I wanted to just show you that again because it is really quite spectacular. That is, I'll just flash off and on there a few times so you can see it sort of go in and out. The reason I wanted to show you that is the following image. Now I am still zoomed in quite a way on my TV at the moment. This is what the Sphinx head looked like in about 1936. It is what I would call the man in the middle. Because in actual fact what you're seeing here is the head I just showed you that turned into American Indian. Before it turned into that, that is the profile of the head we just looked at, that is on the rock I have, at microscopic level, which it is undoubtedly, when you watch that in a clear screen, it's an American Indian it turns into. And in this video, or the evolution video, I discussed that that is exactly what we are being told here. Now I want you to look at this side. You were looking at the profile here of mankind, where he evolved from. And we are not being told here we evolved from an ape. We are being told we evolved, humans, from a reptilian, a hominoid species that rode the duck-billed dinosaur. That is exactly what he is saying. We are a hominoid, and we in actual fact domesticated a duck-billed dinosaur. And it looks to me, in my opinion, that there is the very profile we just looked at on that other rock. And this may be another one in the midst here, that this was part way along through the evolutionary stage, from here to here to here. I just wanted to put that in because I think that deserves to be mentioned, that once again I would see the story is within what appeared to be damage. It doesn't look anything like this now here on the sides. If you go and look at a modern day picture of the Sphinx from the front, I'm pretty certain you'll find all this has been modified to look real smooth now, which is a real pity. Before I go on about the cycle of the planet around the sun, as the message left us in the pyramids and megaliths, tell us that we have two rings of rotation, one very close to the sun where we are at 93 million miles, I say very close. It's a lot closer than out here at 186 million miles from the sun, which is the outer ring of rotation. This ring is indicated as the ring of travel of Mars. I won't go back over what we've gone, that's why I've called this part 3, the cycle, and we will touch again on the Voynich manuscript, but only very shortly. What I wanted to say is, in the field I worked in as a geologist, well not so much a geologist, but a historian or an archaeologist, one of the questions they always ask is, when? That's the very last question I ever asked myself, ever, fixing a computer. It was a question that got asked of me a lot. Like I'd walk up and open my tool bag in front of a machine that was, 6 foot high and 10 foot long, and somebody would be on my shoulder saying, when is it going to be fixed, Brian? Okay, so I hated the question when. So my questions were always why. Why wasn't it working? So it was probably, I still do this now. Why? I'm finding out answers, but I want to know why. Why, if our planet's capable of going backwards and forwards here and doing its thing, why does it go out here? Why do they need to do that? What lesson is there? Remembering that we are an evolving civilization here. We have been put on the planet with some people knowing what was going on. A lot of it is hidden from us. And there are a lot of us that do not know what's going on, and we're being misled. Unfortunately, that is what appears to be the case. I don't want to go there today. I want to discuss why, because there were questions I had. On plane with the sun here, we have two planes, one travelling anti-clockwise and the other travelling clockwise. The horizontal plane travels anti-clockwise, the vertical planes travel clockwise. Okay, so anti-clockwise or counterclockwise is the horizontal plane. I was wondering how and why do we end up with 8-hour days travelling in this direction in the outer ring and 10-hour days travelling in that direction in the outer ring. Why are they so close to each other, where in actual fact in here going anti-clockwise we have 16-hour days, and that way going clockwise we are being told we have 32-hour days. Why? Why is this not the same there as this is out here? We've already said off plane with the sun on our unnatural cycle there, very similar to the cycle we're just finishing now with the rotating plane. I'll show you that very shortly. But why do we travel off plane with the sun there and our speed increases 7-hour days? So it's taking 7 hours to do a full rotation. Yet we're getting higher speeds really in both respects, in every respect there, than we have in here. Why is that so? Here, when we're having 7-hour days, off the plane of the sun, Obviously nobody's living on the planet here, or out here, or going that way. Nobody is living on Earth when it is in the ring 40 million miles further out than Mars. That's where we left our last video, was telling you that that was, in actual fact, what the situation was. We were also told that there, where travelling this way and this way on the horizontal plane caused the axis and the meshing fields to stand the planet up straight, here we're off plane with the sun. We might have the high-speed rotation, but we still are able to have an axis with a tilt on it, if that's the right way to put it. Whether it's exactly the same as this, from what I've looked at, it looks pretty similar. So there's probably a 24-degree tilt out here. The reason it's rotating quicker, there's no opposing plane in the distance between here and here. When we're looking at the planes, the time it takes here to go to there, the distance is further. So it's in actual fact still able to rotate the planet very, very quickly, but still retain a tilt on the axis because there's no opposing field to pull it back up straight. That is what's happening here. What I kept asking myself is, why have we got all these messages? What are they going to do? There's conflicting messages within the messages. I have shown you these images before. What they are is boreholes or bore marks that I believe were in actual fact instructive of the 4 cycles, and possibly showing us the loss of the North Pole landmass here, because the ice on top of it, if the planet is allowed to go really quickly, that the ice mass itself can drill right down through the continent with the weight of ice. That is why I put this in here. But I also brought to your attention that these look like brake calipers or brakes required to slow the planet at given points in time during the cycles that we go through. And I wanted to show you that because last night I had on one of my group's sites a guy put up a rock that he had found, and I'll show you where he found it and I'll show you the rock because it reflects the same thing as this, which got me to thinking about a few other bits and pieces. I know you get a little bit of flicker there, but it's not too bad. I think we can see the rock well enough. From this angle, that rock looks like a duck beak to me, which made me think, yet again, water. I have a man standing behind here. That is the next video I will show you, but I'll want to go through these rock images because they were quite, to me, they meant quite a lot. That's one view. This is the other view of the top view. So there's a borehole through this one and a non-bore hole there, but the other view from the top, if I show you that view, that's the hole that goes right through. I want you to watch that line going down here and this line going down here, and this here and this here, okay? So what I started to realise that I was seeing here, in my opinion, what that meant to me was a real lot to do with straightening the axis up here and what is going to be done and why this inserted image here. I see the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You may not see that as that, that's fine, it's okay. But I see that as a Sydney Harbour Bridge chopped in half and in the drink, so to speak. Not because it's necessarily going to be chopped in half and left in the drink. I'll come to that in a minute. I want you to be aware of what we're seeing on this here. We've got 4 lines like this here. So that's in actual fact looking at, possibly the lines of magnetism of the sun that I've spoken to you about. If I then went back to the lines themselves, and that was this diagram here where I said that there's a horizontal plane rotating in this direction. I've drawn it as a flat plate in that instance. 2 vertical rotating bands of magnetism that rotate clockwise, this one anti-clockwise. The opposing fields make the axis stand straight when we travel either one way or the other on the horizontal plane. The opposing fields bring the planet up straight. When we're off the plane of this horizontal plane, It is these rotating bands here that keep the axis at its tilt and keep it within its specific location in distance from the sun, although it does vary a little bit. It is laid flat like this, it still spins when the Earth is laid flat and the axis is laid flat, which is 2 of the cycles that drive us out beyond Mars and half of the cycle coming back in. That's exactly what happens. We are told that it expands, that the rotation around the sun is not kept at a steady location. It in actual fact expands out to the point in 6,000 years the planet is rotating out beyond Mars. I wanted to show you that. Now if we go back to the rock and understand that what we're seeing there, in my opinion, is we're talking once again the rotating magnetic planes of the sun, different ones. And that this is to do with that and the straightening of the axis and what happens. What I believe we are seeing with these bore marks and bore holes in this, and especially where this was found, I'll show you where it was found. That rock was found right at a beach at that location there. I haven't put the man's name in because he doesn't live there. Okay. I thought it best to leave his name out at this point, so I do very much respect him for letting me put the rock on there. But I wanted to just let you know that that's where he found it, which is also extremely pertinent, and we'll get to that in a minute. I want to show you a video that I've seen many times before. I don't know if I'd be in breach of copyright, but I will show you. That is this anti-gravity wheel. I will talk you through the process of what happens here. This is actually put out by, it's got their Veradicine, if that's what you want to call that. It's actually a guy from Sydney University. It's not something I reckon I could play and it wouldn't be breaking any particular copyright issues. I want you to go and look at it and see what happens. I will talk you through the process. That thing there is about 40 kilos, I believe. And it's very heavy chunk of metal on the end of a rod. And without this rotating, you can flat out lifting it. If you held it by the end of the rod like this, you wouldn't lift it off the ground. And even get somebody else to try and do it, or even to hold it out like this, it's impossible. You'd have to be, I'm not saying there aren't men that could do it, but he is a fit young fella and he could barely lift it off the ground with it being in that position. When he goes through the process of putting on an electric drill here and winding this at speed so that it's going absolutely flat out, he can then lift it up like this, and he can lift it up over his head like this, and he goes right around like this by holding with one hand at the very end of the rod here. Okay, and that is the difference because of the rotation of speed of that. Now I want to go through the process of going back and having a look at that rock yet again. Now I don't know whether or not you're a mechanic or not, but I do work on my own brakes and change my brake pads and whatnot. And I had somebody made a remark under this and said it's a brake caliper. And it's made look like a brake caliper because it was supposed to be found right now at this particular point in our time, which is probably why I was able to find these other rocks and the marks and understand what was on them because of my, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to big note myself. I've met people in my own fields that would run rings around me. Not heaps, but there were some that were really, really good with maths and the mathematical side of computer repairs. I was not that good at that part, but where I was good at was asking why is it not working and finding out the answer. That's actually the part of the job I was good at, and which is why I probably managed to stay till the age of 60 in computer repairs, which is pretty much what I've done all my life. That to me looks like a brake caliper, and I've taken, like I said, I'm electromechanical by nature as well. That was in part of computers when disk drives were as big as your washing machine. You didn't wheel them out and when they broke and chuck them in the bin. You had to fix them at chip level on circuit boards. So that's the concept of where I grew up in that sort of arena. But yeah, so I fixed my own brakes and I'm looking at that saying that's exactly what it looks like, a brake caliper. Now I'll show you something. So we then spin this very, very quickly and we have the same principle. Again, we can lift it up from this end and if this in actual fact weighed 40 kilos, I couldn't lift it up by this end here. It would be impossible. I could if I put a lever in here, yes, but why is it able to be, when it's spun really, really quickly, all of a sudden be able to be lifted up? Why is it? Because it doesn't lose any weight. It's physically the same weight. When we get the weight forcing out towards the end here, we have the same effect going that way. All of it and all the weight is dispersed in this angle away from the centre of point of gravity, or the centre of gravity, which is there. Everything's going away from the centre of gravity and opposing each other. So in actual fact, that's what makes it so light. And physically it is light. If you actually stood there, he does ask a question at the end of that video, and that's how he leaves the video. He says, okay, if I get a set of scales and I hold the rod spinning, am I going to be lighter standing on the scales? And I say, yes you are, because if it's lighter in your hand and you're standing like that, it's going to be no different where you're standing, because the point of gravity of this is where it's spinning. It's not back here. So the answer would be, he would be lighter than if he was standing there with it still on the scales. I wanted to show you that because I wanted to say, okay, well, if we're spinning that one, what happens when we, instead of putting the load or the weight here, I want to put it on the inside ring this time. And so what happens when I do that? And now I spin it. It's going to be lighter. Is it going to be as light? It's going to be directed on rotational speed, isn't it? The speed of however it travels is going to depict whether it's lighter there than if it's there. At least that's the way I would think it would be. I'm not a physics expert, or I've never done physics at university or planetary science. I leave my discussion tab open, so I'm asking a few questions here of people that are experts in such fields, because I certainly am not. But I would see that as being, yes, okay, it will still do the same thing and you will have opposing fields, but you need to rotate it quicker to have the same effect as you would out here, because this is going to be travelling faster because it's further away from here. Okay, and therefore it needs to either double in rotational speed for that to have the same effect as if the mass was on the outer ring. Okay, I want to show you the third one. What happens now if I rotate it very quickly with half of the mass on either side? Once again, I would expect our rotational speed or the mass is going to be somewhere within the centre. That's providing they are fixed and can rotate at the same speed. So in other words, these are fixed between each ring. Now I want to put another proposal to you. What happens when we do this? If we spun that one that way, but this one this way, what happens then? Because I'd like to know. I'm not a physicist, but I'd really like to know that. I could build that, I suppose, and make it, but honestly, for what I actually want to make and a point I'm trying to make today, I don't think I really need to. But if you're a physicist, I would like to know what the physics is behind that outcome. If this one is rotating that way, the centre of mass of this, remembering this is a ring of weight, right? So if it's still going to be weighty. But if it's rotating very, very quickly that way, this one is opposing each other that way. This one's going this way, so it's going to oppose that side there. But are they going to work in opposite with each other so that the mass is still there? I would like to know the answer if you're a physicist. But the reason I wanted to show you that is because I believe that and the rock I just gave you and those drill holes and the aerial view of those drill holes are more, and I've suggested that it is that they can roll the land masses along, and I believe they can. But there is more than one message in the message again, and that is what makes their messages a little bit confusing to understand what they're actually saying. I've discussed this page of the Voynich manuscript in my last video, and suggested to you that it was not text we were looking at. If we're trying to decipher this as text, and we went through the process of indicating that a lot of these, this could be 4, right? It may very well be 4, but it would also be how I would indicate how I've knocked the axis crooked, or knocked the axis over flat, or it could be 4 of these to do the task. These being where there's only one there required to do the task. This could be one that's pushing us out, a real big one. That we've gone through that in the last video, a very big asteroid or comet. I know I call them comets, which technically is incorrect, but really they're big chunks of rock cut off Earth itself and propelled back. That is what the story is. It's parts of Earth itself. And we've spoken of these being the same. There's 3 of the same. If I said what it is, 40LC8G, 40LC8G, you don't write a language with 4 words of the same. It's just not a language. I would expect it is, as I said, a record of events to move the planet in the cycles, in, around, slow, fast, etc., etc., to get the planet to move all through the cycles as we're shown they have, and that we are placed back on Mars at given points in time through a developing, you can't move people that are 100 years ago into space with beings from all over the world. They wouldn't have had a clue of what was going down. In 100 years we've come from that to flying all over the place, and whether we're going to the moon or not, I'll be honest, I'm not going to make a comment with that one, but what I wanted to do was come back to this page wasn't for that. It was more the bottom of the text here, and show you the women in what is made to look like a pool. And you can count the numbers here. They are reflective of the sequences themselves, the dashes around the sides here. I didn't want to go into those because they do reflect the number 16, which is 16-hour days and so on. We've got blue here, but if they're in a swimming pool, there's no blue in the pool. And I think they're actually trying to tell us here that where these people used to swim, there's no water there anymore. That's why it's not blue. He's put blue there and there to say, yes, I didn't run out of blue paint. Okay? I haven't put blue in the swimming pool because where they used to swim, they can no longer swim. That is the message, I believe, to take out of that portion of that page on the Voynich manuscript. I want to move on from that because, having said that, I now understood why we are seeing these boreholes and drill holes and the movement of water within the planet. I'll bring you back to this diagram only because with what we've just discussed, with the water being able to be placed down in caverns within the Earth, that I believe that that's what they're telling us they do. They actually lower the ocean level. That's why the people are not swimming, they're swimming in the bush, because that's where the water is no longer. They drain that much water from the top of the Earth's surface down into an inner ring of water that circles around the core of the planet. Remember, the core of the planet, we are told from the Serapeum, is only 100 kilometres up that the planet moved in the first instance. This inserted image, yet again, at the bottom of South America, is the one that drove the planet up. And then because it locked in with the plane, and it was locked in with the horizontal plane of the sun, it could not be released. And it then began to tilt the axis, and that is the only way that you can tilt the axis, bar moving the moon further away, I believe. But what I wanted to say, if the core of the planet then is as big as the tip of that rod, I now have a rotating band. I probably got these arrows the wrong way, because really this arrow should be going that way. If I'm talking about this circle of water being driven by the vertical planes of rotation of the sun. So in other words, that's because that's going to be far outside the 1,000 or 200 kilometres here. This could be many thousands of kilometres away from the core of the planet. From our deepest oceans are 7 kilometres deep, I believe, that's about right, 7,000 feet deep or something of that nature. But the core of the planet here that we're only saying is 200 kilometres, so putting the moon further away is going to do one thing for us. It will stop the core of the planet getting driven. But do they do that? I don't know, because what I'm saying is that they may very well be able to do this and siphon the water off the planet surface into an inner ring of rotation of water, which in actual fact bluffs the system, and the rotating vertical planes, right, rotate this water far quicker, which reduces the overall mass of the planet because it's actually working in the opposite direction than the outer ring. And that is what I think actually happens, something of that nature. I'm not a physicist, but I would think that if you could do something of that nature, it would in actual fact, from an electromagnetic perspective or within a field of magnetism, reduce the weight of the Earth itself. And that may very well be what they do to keep us within 24-hour days. This is what I'm saying. There may be things they can do that will change to keep it a 24-hour day, because if they don't, there's going to be major problems. Once again, the horizontal band of magnetism of the sun on the surface is still going to drive tidal waves, so you're still going to need Atlantis around the surface water, whatever oceans are on the surface here. But the reason I wanted to say that is why we find the rock where we do. Now this is where the rock was found, right here. Now we've got to say to ourselves, well, why is it there that we need to find that rock? It's where it is that's important. The oceans, how deep are they? They're not very deep at all in that location. If I then went off the coast of Australia, and we know that I've said that what we need to do is whack a comet in here, and that there was indications of a comet, and I worked out the trajectory and all this sort of thing to try and work out where it was coming in. This inserted image is a comet location, is right here. Okay, so that inserted image you're looking at, we come back to the map, that is right on that location there, but that's the line of trajectory. It's not quite that much damage. Now before I go on, I do want to stop for just a second to explain the movements of the planet that we've been told in the Megaliths pyramids and what is going to happen. I stopped at this image, excuse me, for having a beer. But when I started making this video, it was about 38 degrees outside, and I went and had a bit of a swim in the river. The temperature's now dropped, it's about 37 and a half. It hasn't cooled down a whole lot. This is the first impact that tilted the axis, or began the tilt. For that to move the entire mass of Earth upwards 100 kilometres an hour and tilt the axis, it means that very point of contact of the asteroid, comet, meteor, whichever you want to call it, it has to be attached to the core of the planet. So therefore the Earth crust displacement theory that we hear of is a non-existent thing. It's impossible. The planet could not move, and that would have a movement of such a thing like that down so low, close to the Antarctic, with the mass of the planet. The mass of the planet rotating is up here, just like our spinning ball was, or spinning weight on our rod. The mass is at the equator. So to move the mass up and tilt it, that point has to be attached to the core. It cannot be any other way. It has to be that way. You do not need to be a physicist or have any degree. It's basic third form science there. That's all. That's an understanding, very, very basic understanding of what makes a mass move when you hit it where you hit it. And when it's spinning at 1,000 kilometres an hour on the equator here, the only way that can happen, and that movement can happen, is when the point of contact is connected to the core. If we then understand the movement that we're about to incur, we're told we're about to incur, is very quick snap of 24 degrees to 12 within about 12 minutes. We're going to drop about 10 degrees off in 12 minutes. From the 12th to the 13th degree is very quick. That's when the core of the planet is grasped by the horizontal plane, and it rips it real fast and rotates at 16,000 miles an hour faster. We have the problem with the sun's then prolonged narrow horizontal beam, not just rotating the planet quickly to the point we only have 16-hour days, but driving oceans and tsunamis every day. On the eastern coast is going to be hammered by a tsunami every morning. That is what's driven by the sun's narrow magnetic beam. So we have a prolonged issue, which is why we've got to go through briefly now what we are used to counteract each. I've said to you that the inserted image now that we see of the water manipulation through harmonics is the management of the prolonged sun or narrow magnetic beam of the sun on the oceans, stopping that happening, which is Atlantis, surrounding the oceans, crisscrossing the Pacific, which is the biggest ocean. For that to be installed, the ocean needs to be at the level it needs to be at for that to happen. The immediate rip or movement of 24 degrees up to 12 or 10 or wherever they want to have that, or wherever it's got to be for the process here to be successful so that we're not all killed. You do not leave a message like we have here. If the intent was to have them all put us back in caves starting fires with sticks, that is not their intention. Their intention was to have us where we are now, ready to move on and ready to accept and understand everything that we're about to learn. Therefore, the rip and tilt of the axis is going to be dealt with the moon moving further away. You can't move the moon further away until you've lowered the oceans, because even just the moon moving further away, and it controls our tides, I would imagine a greater part of the water is going to be drawn towards the equator at the moment. So by the moon itself. So therefore our tides will change to the point we may flood certain areas down the south and leave us bare at the top, or the equator areas. If in actual fact the moon rotates around the equator, which is where I would expect it probably does. I don't know that, so I'm just saying that's more than likely the case. I wanted to say that at this point we needed to understand those things because of where we're going now. And that is where I've said the comets are going to hit. I'll go to Australia first, and we'll move around here to Australia, because the one thing I did say with Australia is we were going to get a comet that was going to strike here and go through to Canberra. I'll zoom in closer here now and say, okay, well, just imagine if our oceans are, as I've said, drawn off to a point where the entire continental shelf is exposed, which is what I expect it's going to be, very, very closely. Exposed to a point of where the water now is out here. We have not one harbour in our entire eastern seaboard here that's going to have water in it, which is why I think this inserted image now, which I see as being a representation of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, lays it in half, sitting in the harbour. Not necessarily because that's actually what's going to happen, but merely saying that it's a fruitless exercise there. You do not need a bridge across a harbour that does not have water in it anymore. That's actually why I think that's there. And we're going to see in the next 12 months the ocean levels drop, quite the opposite than what we're being told about global warming and rising oceans and such things. Trust me, I've stood on rocks out here recently that I've stood on 30 years ago fishing at the same rock on the same low tide. I'm standing on the same rock fishing in the same place. I would see that what we're being told here by this impact here, that is off the island of Canberra here, right there. But when we look at that island, what we are seeing here is not necessarily the fact that it has to come in here and wipe out the island of Batesman's Bay and take us all the way to Canberra. Bateman's Bay is not necessarily that heavy on a populated area in relation to Sydney. Bateman's Bay, I've never been there, but I did at one point move at Ulladulla, which is a little bit further up the coast here. But maybe what we're seeing here is the requirement of this comet to land either way for a totally different reason. I will explain as I go along. So that's one comet impact, was, I said, in line with this, but maybe the line isn't starting here and going to Canberra. It's just in line with Canberra, but hitting out here, off the continental shelf, and dragging it right through to here, rather than the other way. So if I went from Canberra's here, and this is why, the reason why that damage there is exactly the same length of damage as shown in this inserted image. It's the middle comet that fell in the instance of our globe being tilted 6,000 years ago. So it isn't a stupid thing to think, well, maybe it's not going to land on the island, but it's going to land out here in that line. That's one comet, asteroid, meteor, whichever you wish to call it. Like I said, it's a chunk of Earth. It's a chunk of our planet, hurled back at our planet. The other place where it said one was going to land was here, right in line with there. That was the second one. This one here was going to break in two. One of them was going to land just a little shy of Ayers Rock, or Uluru. It was shorter than this one. The other one was going to land right there and dig out a fair bit of chunk of land there. If I move from there to the next place that I know we've discussed already, was South America. Now, looking at the South American continent here, the other one was going to land in this area here. I'll do an insert now, and if you look at this rock, the things we see flying out of the shape of South America on this microscopic image here, which has also got to do with the installation of Atlantis, they come from this area. I'll also do an insert now of tide changes that they've had in that very area, right here. Right there, there are places that have had the ocean withdraw out of bays. They had no idea why. So the other one here, but look at there, once again we see the continental shelf way out here. The other impact we looked at was New York City. Once again we have a very, very large metropolis who, if the oceans were out here, they have no way of trading. They've got nowhere. There's no harbour that they could load a boat on in the entire length of the landmass on the east coast of America either, just like Australia. So if I said, okay, well maybe the comet that's going to go through New York here, look at it, it's pretty easy to see the situation is here. And once again, if you zoom in closely here, you'll look at this type of thing in the bottom of the ocean here from years past. I don't know about anybody else, but that looks like a river, and you get the same thing if you go down between Tasmania and Australia, the very same thing. It is look like there's been a river there in the past. So it is possible with what they've told us that they could in actual fact take the entire landmass out of there, move it away, and then drop an asteroid, comet, whatever you wish to, right there again, going all the way through here and creating a harbour as such. The other place we looked at was England. The other place where I have said that there is going to be another major impact, and the biggest comet required, or asteroid, like I said, I've been saying comet all along. It's not really the right word, but then asteroid isn't, and neither is meteor really, because in actual fact, if they're cutting chunks of Earth out and chucking it back, we could just say big bits of rock. But we were talking about this being landing in Oloron in France. It was not a silly suggestion, because this, and I suggest you look at it, is an insert that I'll put in here of a story that happened sometime back now in the 1800s. It happened in the university where what happened was a whole lot of string was dropped over a place. It had substance, they looked at it, and they were, like I said, it was a university of such, an educational premises. The person that had in actual fact written the story about what had happened was in actual fact a lecturer at the university. And there were UFOs in the sky that dropped this stuff that looked like spider webs all over the university for it to all just disappear. Like the rocks that I've shown you that have strings on them. It's like there's strings attached. So I don't know, I'm not going to say, and where I have said things incorrectly, is they can chop this out and move it, yes. But whether they do or not, I shouldn't judge that. Because I've said in videos, I cannot see them coming down here and killing millions of people. That would be no better than the people that do such things. So if this lands here, in Oloron in France, and goes all the way up there, and creates a really, really big long harbour that you can come in here and then Europe can trade through France. And we've got problems here, one way or the other. And it might be why these comets are necessary. Because once the ocean is drained, we've got no way of getting anything out of any country here. We are really a problem. The only place where you can do this is where you've got deep ocean, immediately off the shore. That's why I said to you, I think that rock I showed you was found here. Because this is a very, very shallow ocean here. You know, and there are the stories of being able to cross this ocean here, cross the Red Sea. How did we do that? When the water wasn't there. Now I've showed you this before, and this is how I'll finish the video today. I wanted to talk to you about the method of the oceans and the way they're going to be used, and I've said to you before that this is an actual fact showing us how the planet is moved outwards, depending on whether it's spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise on one of the 4 cycles. And that we're either going to go down here with a loop of the planet's plane of travel is going to move 180 degrees, like so. It comes back up and joins the plane of the sun, or the horizontal plane, can only go 180 degrees. I've also said to you that this is, I would expect the way they communicate in respect of their fibre optics is not a single core, one colour fibre optic. It's a 4 core with any facet of connection being addressable within every fold of the cable. Like I said, they could have a length of cable that big and have as much processing power as the entire floor of Google, because you can whack a colour palette through each one of those, providing you can separate each individual colour at each point, which they would know how to do. It's an amazing thing. But I also see it as saying, let's funnel some of the ocean's water off there and into another ring of water around the core of the planet. And is that not doing the same thing? And then these 4 things here are then talking about pumping the water around the core continuously in a flowing motion, as to allow the core to be unseen by the sun, or not so much unseen, but certainly manipulated in such a manner as so our rotational speed does not change. Our axis will tilt, yes, but I would expect that is what they're going to do, but they have to drain the oceans to a point where our oceans are way out to sea. I will choose this location here, although there are many I could go to all over the globe. I was certainly made aware of this sort of thing with New Earth channel. That's Sylvia's really got some really good work up, and I watched and started watching her many years ago, long before I realised what was on the rocks here. I wanted to zoom into this location here and show you that there are structures well and truly identifiable under the ocean. Right here, you can see this in underneath it looks like what is an old runway from, an old airport from long ago, and it's well and truly underwater now. I would suspect, like I said, our ocean levels will be dropped to a point where they become manageable, both with Atlantis over the top of the ocean doing this inserted image here, like I said, controlling this surface tension of the ocean, controlling our tides, the moon move further away, the device on the inside rotating water around the core so that that acts as a brake so that we do not get this whip of speed of 16,000 miles an hour within an instant. And that is what I believe we are seeing, which is why we are seeing structures built below our oceans level, because our oceans have been lowered before for the very same process. That does bring us to the end of this video now, and I'll wish you all a very lovely Christmas and Happy New Year, but more importantly a peaceful New Year. There are many, many places on earth that are not subject to the peace and harmony that I grew up with. My father had to venture off many, many years ago as a young man and fight for his life. And he also, albeit I was not even a twinkle in his eye, he fought for mine as well. I have spent some years, quite a few years actually, trying to put things right in the community I live in at great risk to my own life as well as my children's. Sometimes you just have to stand up. It's not a matter of whether you want to or not. It's just a matter of you having to. And this instance was one of those. And I've always been that sort of person, I guess. If it needed doing, and I was in a position to do something about it, I always would be the person to step up. That's just the way I've always been. Listen, thank you very much for watching my videos. This is Brian Whitten and ET Art. Once again, have a lovely Christmas. Bye bye. Thank you.